Hi everyone, and welcome to week 11 of our Sweet Childhood Memories Sew-Along, hosted by Pat Sloan at her website, ilovetomakequilts.com. This week, we want to hear about your childhood home, so why not, over on Pat's Facebook community, when you share a picture of your block, tell us your story about your childhood home. If you haven't done so already, jump over to Pat's website, download this week's free pattern, come back here, and I'll show you how to do it. For this week, I've only made one change to the cutting directions, and I'll point that out to you later. So you'll see that these fabrics aren't the fabrics that I'm using for my quilt, and that's because in the block that I made and the video that I made already for this week's block using my fabrics, it got really confusing because I am once again using a directional fabric from that fabric line. So I thought, because this is already slightly more complicated with the combinations of half square triangles and such, I also made changes to where I was putting which colors. I decided to make a fresh video using just solids so that you'll be able to follow along quite simply and not get any confusion. So what I pointed at just before there was a 4.5 by 2.5 inch rectangle, and I cut 4 of those from the dark fabric in place of cutting the 8 2.5 inch squares, and I'm going to do those border pieces as an elongated flying geese unit, but we'll get to that later in the video. We're just going to bring our chart in now and start with making our half square triangles. As you'll see here, we need to have different combinations, and Pat has lovingly labeled them as A, B, C, and D. So I'm going to start with my A units, which we need 8 of. So I'm going to grab 4 of my background squares and 4 of my medium fabric and make the half square triangles. To make the half square triangles, we need to draw a diagonal line in one direction, corner to corner, on our background squares, pair these with our 4 medium fabrics, and then sew 1/4 inch on each side of that drawn line. With our stitching now done, we just need to cut these units apart. I'm going to give them a quick press first, and then I'm going to cut them apart in half along our drawn line, and then press them all to the darker of the 2 fabrics. We now need to trim these down to our required size as per the pattern. And if you've watched any of my videos in the past, you will know that I like to do this 2 at a time because I am impatient and I like quick results. So to trim these down, I make sure that I've got that seam in the middle nice and snugly nested, so I have opposing colors on each other there. I then use my 6.5 inch square ruler, and I place the diagonal that's on the ruler along my stitching line. I then ensure that I have enough fabric outside my required trim down size, in this instance that is 2.5 inches, on all 4 sides of the block before trimming the first 2 sides. We then rotate the block around, and in this instance we can put our 2.5 inch measurement on our 2 freshly cut sides, and ensuring that our diagonal is still on our stitching line, and trim our final 2 sides. Do this for all 8. With those all trimmed now, I'm just going to mark them with my A so that I know that these are my 8 half square triangles that we needed for the A unit. Now it's time to move on to do the B, and I'll bring the chart back in here, and for B we need 4 that are made of a combination of dark and medium fabrics. So from my little stack here of squares, I am going to pull out 2 for the medium and 2 of the dark squares. Then it's just a matter of wash, rinse, repeat of what we did before. As before, I'm going to label these with the B, as these are the 4 B units that we need, and just continue on following the chart that is in the pattern and make the required units, and I'll meet you back once they're all done. I am choosing to just use the dark fabric for my pinwheel, as well as the dark fabric required in the pattern, so you'll see that I'm using the same one here. With these ones, from future me editing, I realised later on in the video you'll see me have to clip these to put them in. So for these ones, please press to the lighter of the 2 fabrics and you won't need to clip your seams. We now need to start making our units that will make up this final block, and we're going to begin by making our corner units, and for this we need to lay them out as per the pattern, which you've got the little inset in the top left hand corner there, and then we will sew these together in a 4-patch fashion. Because of the way we have pressed these, our top 2 half square triangle units will actually nest nicely to do those seams. So we'll start by sewing our vertical seams and then move on to our horizontal seams. So now that we've got all our vertical seams sewn, we just need to clip these apart and give them a press. So for the 2 half square triangle units that sit at the top of the block, I am going to press towards the piece that would be on the outside corner. So the one that has the 2 colors, not the one with the background. And for the ones underneath, I'm going to press towards the solid piece of fabric, and in this instance, that's my grey one. You could press these in either direction, just make sure that they're opposing, but when we move through to the final stages of this block, you'll see that by pressing them the way that I have suggested will give you seams that will nest nicely with no clipping and nothing else needed. Oops, indeed. As you can see, I have sewn my half square triangle to the wrong side of the solid square. So I'm just going to fast forward through the part where I fix this so that we can move on. That's much better now. So now we're just going to sew this final horizontal seam, and for these units, just press them towards the piece that has the solid square. We now need to construct the blocks that will go in the center of the top and bottom row and at the sides of our middle row for our central block. As I said before, when we got to the D half square triangle units, it's best that you press to the lighter of the 2 fabrics, as you'll see me needing to clip it here to be able to sew these 2 units together and control that bulk. So we'll sew our 2 half square triangle units together. Hopefully you got the memo about the pressing, and then we'll add our solid rectangle to it as per the insert that was up in the top left hand corner. We'll then press these towards the solid rectangle fabric. Just as a quick note here, when we press these units, I do press them open to further control that bulk at the peak of where the 2 half square triangles are coming together. So as I mentioned when we were at the beginning of the video, this is where I made a slight change in that in place of cutting the 8 2.5 inch squares, I have instead cut 4 4.5 by 2.5 inch rectangles, and I am going to make the sashing units via making what they call an elongated flying geese. So I'm in effect going to put a sew and flip on each side of these as if we were making a normal flying goose unit. But instead of just using squares that fit perfectly, I've got longer strips that will give me the sashing without the extra seam in the middle. I will fast forward through this part, but you can watch it. It won't be that fast, but if you need further instructions on how or why I chose to do this, let me know in the comments below. It's now time to lay out the central part of our block to move on to this block construction, and you can see in the top left hand corner something flapping there. I just hung all of my sashing pieces over one of my lighting poles, so sorry if that gets distracting. Anyway, as per the pattern, we'll just need to lay this out by placing our solid center, then placing our center and side units on here to create our pinwheel. And then we will plonk the corner units in, and if you've pressed every step of the way as I've suggested, every single one of your seams here will nest nicely to move on to the 9-patch construction that we need for this central block. To do the 9-patch construction, as always, we'll start by sewing our vertical seams and finally our 2 horizontal seams. When coming to press these units before moving on to doing the horizontal seams, we're going to press out towards the corners on the top and the bottom row and in towards the center on the middle row. Once we've sewn our 2 vertical seams, we're also then going to press both of those towards the center. And you'll see here as we go through that all of the seams, as I said, will nest nicely. our central unit now all sewn together, we just need to add the sashing to our block and our block will be done. So we'll put the shorter of the two sashing pieces on the left and the right hand side of this block. I use a method that I call sew and hope to try and match up our pieces on the solid piece and where that flying goose unit is in the middle of the sashing. You can sort of see me play around with it a little, and I just eyeball it to make sure that there is a nice 1/4 of an inch there. There is a technique where you can try and do this and set it up and called a drop pin, but I find whenever I actually do that, my seams are further off than when I just sew and hope. If you would like to see the drop pin technique though, to ensure that these intersections should meet up, please let me know in the comments below and I can include that in a future video. So once again, we're going to sew the left and the right sashing on, and then the top and the bottom, and our block will be done. As promised, here is the block that I made with my fabrics that go with my quilt, and you will notice here that I have one of my half square triangles around the wrong way, so I just need to fix that, and my block for this week is done. Thanks for joining me again this week, folks. If you haven't done so already, like my video, share it with a friend, or subscribe if you haven't already done so. Most important, tickle that little bell icon and you won't miss a thing. Bye for now, and I'll see you all again next week.